Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Agile IT Tech Talk. I'm your host, Sean Spicer. Today, I am joined by Miguel Escalante, our senior cloud engineer here at Agile IT. Pardon the slide shuffle here. Today, we're going to be talking about Azure licensing, reserved instances, hybrid benefit. So I just wanted to start out here going over some of the Microsoft licensing in general. As most of you on the call know, we're a cloud solution provider, better known as a CSP. This is a unique enterprise licensing program that Microsoft has that really opens up the full benefit of enterprise Microsoft services to smaller businesses. So again, you can see here, minimum seats 1 versus enterprise agreements 500. Some of you on the call may be part of the GCC High program, AOSG, which is a modified enterprise agreement that allows us to bring people in under the 500 seats. The really nice benefit with CSP, in addition to just having one person you deal with all your invoicing from, is that it's pay-as-you-go month to month, whereas most of the MPSA, the enterprise agreements, and the Microsoft Open licenses are all annual payments where you have to pay upfront. So just wanted to kind of get that there because there will be mention of that later as we're talking about the Azure licensing. And to show some of the complexity here, this is the layout of all of the Office licensing available. There's actually more than this now. This is a slide that I think is about a year old. So we're starting to see the licenses start to form up right now for Windows Virtual Desktop, a lot of new services. Rumor has it that EMS is going to be rebranded as just kind of part of Microsoft 365 soon. But again, that benefit of CSP is that we have licensing experts here in-house. So don't want to waste too much time talking about it, but just in terms of that licensing, this all is kind of what's underlying what we're going to be looking at about Azure licensing. So I'm going to hand this over to Miguel here, who's going to talk more about Azure and the hybrid use benefit. Now, Miguel, this is this also called BYOL? Is this bring your own licensing, or is there a difference there?
It is the same thing. There's a little bit of differences there. BYOL refers to something that you bought and you bought and it's yours forever. Hybrid use benefit requires you to be under software assurance timeline. So it's sort of the same but different. If we go here, it says hybrid use benefits who've already big investments on premise with Windows and SQL Server, user licenses with software assurance or Windows subscriptions to big Azure.
So for the people that aren't in enterprise agreements, do you want to talk a little bit about software assurance?
Absolutely. Software assurance allows you to purchase software. When you buy the original license from a provider, either it be CDW or whoever that may be, you can actually enroll in software assurance, which will cover any upgrades or any updates to the software. Well, major updates, like let's assume you bought SQL Server 2016 and 2018 and you bought it with software assurance. Well, you're entitled to however many years you bought, the maximum is 3, to get the latest updates and upgrades to that product, as well as being able to run in Azure until that assurance period runs off. Mm-hmm. Before it does, you can request to renew the assurance for another 3 years or another year, and that'll still make you compliant, and that'll still give you the rights to keep being able to perpetually upgrade to the latest, greatest, if that's, what you can do and what you need to do.
And one of the other benefits of software assurance is, depending on the amount of licenses purchased, there are also training days that are available as kind of an added bonus, which can then be converted over to planning hours. So if any of you are working with us using vouchers for services, that's where that comes from, is that's part of that software assurance.
Right. And then, you can buy software assurance for a product, or you can buy it from an operating system. Oh. So if you do it for an operating system, Windows is on a approximately 2 and 4 year release schedule for the server products. You buy one with 3 years, you're more than likely going to get grandfathered into another one. So Windows Server 2012, Windows Server 2012 R2, Windows Server 2016, Windows Server 2019, I don't think have been released yet, or probably will be released, but they're doing it in the form of a service pack upgrade, but you need to have that. So good stuff there. Let's talk about the SQL VM bring your own license part, it is a lot more cost effective, just because if you were to spin up a machine with SQL from the marketplace in Azure, if you're on the commercial enterprise agreement side, they roll in the SQL licensing costs along with your CPU cycles, the number of CPUs and all that good stuff. So even though you're going to be compliant with SQL Server licensing, it will cost a little bit more because they're going to be doing it in addition to your VM gauges you're running in cycles, you're going to be paying for SQL Server as well. On average, it's about 30% cheaper we've seen to do. There's also the difference in editions. Microsoft really tries to get you to go with Enterprise Edition for SQL Server, and I don't blame them. It's a pretty cool product. It's powerful. You can do anything you want with it, but you pay for it. And a lot of organizations, do not really need the enterprise license to achieve what they start out to do. So sometimes, bring your own license for SQL Server with software assurance is the best solution, just so you don't have to, unnecessarily purchase any type of additional, licensing that you don't need.
Yep.
All right, reserved instances, the main meeting we're talking about. So Microsoft recently is between air quotes here, they released a program called reserved instances. It allows you to pay up front for compute power, primarily in a region of your preference where you're going to be running your resources for a very deep discounted cost. Now, you can do 1 year, you can do 3 year. 3 year is the more significant one. I've seen customers get up to 70% discount on what they're running the workloads. The thing is, you have to pay up front for them.
Right.
So if that's, it can get a little bit expensive, but it definitely makes sense for the larger VM instance types over the long run. If you can buy, a larger machine with eight, it really starts making a huge difference. Anything above 8 vCPUs, you get a lot of cost upfront benefit. Your return on investment, you start seeing it first 6 months you're running it already. You can also pair that with with hybrid use benefit to even get more, to get more of a discount. You can apply the licenses, you can apply the reservations to any machine that's running on your environment, as long as it's on the same VM family. What does that mean? Well, I don't need to specifically buy, if I have a machine called SQL 01 that has 8 vCPUs, I don't need to necessarily buy for a DS4 v3 reservation for a SQL for that only one machine. I can go ahead and I can say apply to any machine that does not have a reservation. So it can be a blanket statement. I buy 5 reservations. I'm just using 4 machines now. This time, the second I spin up a 5th machine, it'll start with a reservation cost. I've already paid for that compute up front, even if I don't have them running right now. And they can actually be on the same VM family, but not the same VM size, meaning that the discount will apply proportional to what the monthly cycle is. But let's assume I haven't figured out my infrastructure yet, but I want to buy reserved instances. So I know that I'm going to be buying approximately something along the DS v3. So buy a couple of those. You're going to benefit from the cost savings if you do it up front. Not every single VM family is available, though, through reserved instances. That's sometimes the catch. Here, what we do is before we actually endeavor into saying yes or no, we do a discovery of your tenant and identify what machines are candidates for purchasing reserved instances, which ones are not. The ones that are not, if we want to move them, we can either place them in another VM family, similar size, and then based on performance, this is another tech talk we had, Sean, but you can also need the right size.
Right, so this goes back to the right sizing your virtual machine stock that we did, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, if you have a machine there that you're spending $400 a month and your CPU is idling at 3%, do you really need it that big? No. So first thing, let's adjust it. After we do the adjustment of the size, we'll say, hey, you're already, without necessarily buying a reserved instance, you're already having a cost benefit, right? So now that you're right side, now that you're operating under 50, 60% CPU utilization, not all the time, but bursts, you're like, okay, well, I feel comfortable with this. The application's performing adequately. Okay, well, we initially just migrated you, and that does require a reboot of the server, by the way, just changing the size. So once we get you to the correct size, that it is on a reserved instance available family, then we would go ahead and say, well, do we plan on running this in a server for 3 years? Maybe you're just maybe you identified this virtual machine as part of one of the pillars you're going to be taking down as part of your cloud journey to SaaS or to platform as a service, to other higher forms of cloud enablement, cloud services. So that's something for you to think about. Servers will not always be servers, right? Before, the big thing was file servers and Active Directory domain controllers in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
I have a VPN, my file server's in the cloud. Well, right now, files mostly is SharePoint, and Active Directory and domain controllers are pretty much getting substituted by Azure AD. So before you commit also to a 3-year investment for a VM, make sure that the roadmap and the strategy that you have will justify that upfront investment, even though you're going to save money. But are you going to be moving away from that anytime soon? If you're going to be moving away within a year, it doesn't make sense to pay for 3 years.
So I understand if there's not an answer to it because it's still in preview. Is this something where you'd be kind of concerned if somebody came to us and said, hey, listen, I've got this huge RDP farm and I want reserved instances to run remote desktops on, knowing that Windows Virtual Desktop is going to be released sometime in the next
I would ask
Microsoft
them,
timeline.
are there other servers that we can apply that reservation to? So, because remember, once you buy it, you can't get it back. So you're committing, basically this Microsoft is using this vehicle as their data center planning tool to plan out capacity for the next 2-3 years, right?
Right.
Because they're making their services more and more robust. So people are moving to their hosted services versus just running their stuff on IaaS. So that is the driving factor behind the reserved instance and the cost benefit and all that, is so they can get a better handle and they know strategically when to buy hardware and when those data centers and extensions to those data centers are to be put in place.
And also where to put them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where to put them, exactly, because if you start to see a burst in activity in US West 2, and US West 2 is just, there as a DR site for US West, then you need to start ramping up US West 2.
Just this month, they announced the break ground on the new Arizona data center that will be 100% solar powered. Some cool stuff out there.
Well, there's one there. There's one off the coast of Africa, which actually is true. It's entirely through
Wind.
No, sea current.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, and then they've got the water cooled one.
Yeah.
That they just dropped in the ocean.
So a lot of stuff that's unconventional or not really within the realm of traditional data centers. But hey, as long as it keeps lowering the bill for my VM usage per cycle, I'm happy. These are the VM families supported. Obviously, you'll see that there are some of them here, not all of them. I was talking to Sean previously. It's like you're probably never going to see the B series here because it's burstable. You can't reserve burstable CPU unless you're going to use it. And if you're going to use it, you're going to probably buy a standard instance, right? Basically, this shows you a more of a graphical description of what we've been touching base on, which is the more licensing you use from Microsoft, the more expensive it is to run. The more you bring over from your side, you just basically pay for the metal and CPU usage.
Yeah, but they call that the Linux rate.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of cute. You're not paying for the operating system, you're just paying for the machine.
Right. So there are obviously certain things that you want to be mindful of, right? If you want to do software assurance, make sure that you're still current. Make sure that whoever is running that instance of that VM is aware that it's running on software assurance so they do not let it lapse. That's also an important thing because you don't want to be, we're running on software assurance. Well, lapsed 3 years ago. Oh, by the way, here's an audit from Microsoft. You're delinquent for not running this. It's going to be a lot more, even if you do apply the reserved instance cost. All right. We are going to be doing a brief demo here. Unfortunately, a lot of this is commerce based. So I can't do an end-to-end demo, unfortunately, but what I can do is I can show you guys how it would look and where it would show up. Can we do Edge?
Oh yeah.
Where is, oh, there you go.
There you go.
So,
just drag them over to the screen.
perfect. All right, so this is me, of course, in Partner Center. Okay, I compress this, hold on. And this is our Azure subscription. Now, this is one of our test tenants, so we're fine with you guys, seeing this information, no biggie. But as you can see here, I went as if this is my CSP interface. If you were doing it by yourselves in an enterprise agreement, you would actually go to the virtual machines themselves. You would hit reservations, and then you would see purchase reservations. Now, this is going to take a while. It's going to say you can't do it because you're not on an enterprise agreement. So I just show you how you would go about buying one if you were an EA.
Okay.
If you're on CSP, on the end user side, it's a lot easier. Why? Send us an email. We'll take a look at your consumption. We'll right size your machine prior. And then after all that's said and done, are you happy with it? Yeah. Are you saving money? Yeah. Do you want to go through, you want to do a reserved instance to even save you more money? Yeah. Okay, let's do it, right? For us, it's a lot easier to do. We would select the subscription first that you have, the data center that you're looking into running, which is where you would be currently running your machines. Then the term that you want, the category, if we already know, and then you can see right here the type of series that we have. We would basically just go to a OBS series. Interesting.
Is that burstable?
But they're very big.
Oh yeah.
See, 16 yeah. So yeah, 16 cores, 20 cores. So anyway, but yeah, for example, let's talk about a DSV2 series. 3-year subscription. This is DS14. So this is a very sizable machine, right? If you go to click on full descriptions, 3 years, US West, DS 4 cores. So these are more memory optimized. Anyway,
one thing that I noticed is when I've read the literature, and I don't get to go into the heavy tech stuff like you do, Miguel, is when I read the literature, it says like term 1 to 3 years. But when you click here, there's 1 or 3 years.
Or 3 years.
It's not 1, 2, 3. It's 1 or 3.
Yeah, that's an important thing. Majority of people that do this always do it for 3 years.
Well, so you get an extra, what, 50% savings?
It is significant, yeah. So here, for example, most people that use a domain control or purpose a domain controller or Active Directory Connect box use this one, right?
Okay.
So you would do here is you would say, purchase me one of these. At the cart. And from the CSP perspective, all we need to do is we need to review and finalize the order. When that does happen, because I don't want to.
No, so it did prompt you there to go ahead and purchase licenses. If you're doing the bring your own, you can do it that way. But you can also run Linux up there. You can run Kali Linux. We did the tech talk on that.
Yeah, and we can go ahead and say, okay, now what type of scope do we want? Do we want shared VM? We want it shared between all the VMs in that subscription. Now that doesn't mean they all get the hybrid benefit and they all get the discount, but that means you can apply that reservation to any VM.
Okay.
This is specifically helpful for when if you have, I don't know, I guess you could probably warrant the use case, but if you have multiple VMs under the same subscription, but a different resource group that different business units are using, and only certain people are buying reservations. Let's assume you have the finance department, they want to save all the money as possible, right? So let's assume finance wants to buy reservations ahead of time. They don't want to share them with HR. They want finance machines, since they're being evaluated as a department, to be the most efficient ever. So they're going to buy up front their machines, but they don't want to share with HR. They're like, no, they're my reservations. I own them. Me. So you can actually move from scope share to scope individual machine. So if you do shared, anybody in the tenant can use that reservation, but you can really lock them down. Once the purchase has been completed, they would appear here, and you would see the scope here is shared, single subscription, or resource group. Shared is anybody in any subscription that is in this tenant, because remember, tenants can have multiple subscription. The general rule is you have one subscription, but that doesn't mean that's the limit, right? You can have a subscription for dev, you can have a subscription for test, for dev, whatever. You can also have this would apply to any machine in any subscription. If you want to do per subscription only, let's assume you have a HR subscription or an accounting subscription, then you say, okay, I only want to apply it to that subscription. So all the VMs in that one subscription, or all the VMs in that single resource group, which would be the more granular approach, right? A department would pretty much own resource groups for compute or whatever. So that's why that comes to be packaged that way.
Okay.
It took us a while to figure out first why one would want to do such a thing, but I guess it makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So is that it?
For now, yeah, that's it.
All right.
I guess we're probably going to be revisiting this sometime in the near future, because there's a lot of stuff that Microsoft's trying to do with reservations, and especially with other services, not just VMs. They're trying to also do SQL Server reserved instances, app service reserved instances, things of that nature. So even though app service is a fairly low cost service running on Azure, approximately typically a user that's running a website on Azure would spend anywhere between $50 and $70 a month. Can you imagine doing 60 to 70% savings on that for 3 years? You wouldn't really pay a lot up front. You would pay basically literally like 6 months for 3 years worth of usage.
I can't imagine having a website that needed the same resources for 3 years in a row. If I'm not doubling the resources I need every 6 months, I'm not doing my job. But that's me being a marketer. So what happens when you go over? Does it just bill at the normal rate for overages, or?
It's only set up for the particular size of the app service.
Yep.
So yeah, you can't technically go over. But again, that's something that we want to explore more in depth for services versus just VMs, which is the talk that we were doing.
All right, well, thank you very much, Miguel. As always, what we're going to do here is we're going to say goodbye to everybody who's watching us on YouTube, reading here on the blog, and we're going to cut that recording and open it up for Q&A amongst our attendees. Tech Talks is a benefit for our MSP and CSP clients here at Agile IT. But for those of you watching online, thanks for joining us.